Today's reading comes from Mark's Gospel, and it's Mark chapter 6, verses 30 to 34, and then 53 to 56. The context of our reading, the first part at least anyway, is that Jesus has sent out the 12 disciples, and we've had in Mark's Gospel the interlude when we hear the story of the death of John the Baptist. So, chapter 6 and verse 30. The apostles returned and met with Jesus and told him all they had done and taught. There were so many people coming and going that Jesus and his disciples didn't even have time to eat. So he said to them, "Let us go off by ourselves to some place where we will be alone, and you can rest a while." So they started off in a boat by themselves for a lonely place. Many people, however, saw them leave and knew at once who they were. So they went from all the towns and ran ahead by land and arrived at the place ahead of Jesus and his disciples. When Jesus got out of the boat, he saw this large crowd, and his heart was filled with pity for them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began to teach them many things. They crossed the lake and came to land at Gennesaret, where they tied up the boat. As they left the boat, people recognized Jesus at once. So they ran throughout the whole region, and wherever they heard he was, they brought to him sick people lying on their mats. And everywhere Jesus went, to villages, towns, or farms, people would take those who were ill to the marketplaces and beg him to let them at least touch the edge of his cloak, and all who touched it were made well. In the way that Mark has assembled his material, these two passages are a bit like episodes that you watch in some soap opera or in a box set on a streaming channel, where you reflect on an episode and think, well, nothing much happened there, but it helped to move the plot along. And that's kind of what these two passages are about. In the first one, we've actually got the prelude to the feeding of the 5,000, which is then in Mark's Gospel immediately followed by the miracle of Jesus walking on water. And we've skipped both of those things out and jumped straight to the next reading, which is itself a prelude to the next set of conflict with the religious authorities of the day. So what we've got in Mark's Gospel in these two readings is this stark contrast again between the reaction of the people, the crowd, that sort of generalized set of people, everybody else, who loved Jesus, who wanted to be with Jesus, who thronged to be there, who, yes, of course, took the sick to be made well, but also just wanted to be with him, because this was truly miraculous, what was going on. And the crowd, we're told, was so large, contrasted so sharply with the reaction of the religious authorities. The stories in and of themselves aren't really important, but if you step back a little bit, think of the picture that Mark is painting here, which is the real story. It is that God comes in the person of Jesus, and what people see in Jesus is unconditional love. We're told in that reading, aren't we, that his heart was filled with pity for them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. They were directionless. They had no proper way of being alive. They were alive and busy and doing stuff, but there was no real connection with the God who made them. There was no sense of deep peace of knowing God in their hearts, and that's why God came in the person of Jesus, to make that relationship close and personal by surrendering himself in that physical body to the desires of people like you and me. And the reaction that won out in the end, at the end of his physical life at least, was hatred and malice, and a desire to put this person down so that they would no longer be an annoying buzz in their ear, a distraction, a way of highlighting the fact that the religious practices of the day were dried up and useless. Here was a new and fresh relationship with the God who made all things. And the people were told en masse, of course, that wasn't every single person, but, generally, people thronged and were so amazed at what was being offered here. And yes, as I say, there was physical healing, so of course people were amazed at that and wanted it, because why wouldn't you? To be cured and restored. But it was just something completely unique. And so people wanted to be there, and the excitement is palpable in these passages, isn't it? The crowd that is so large that thronged around the lake, and even when they crossed to the other side, people got to hear about the fact that Jesus, they recognized him at once, and so they were all there, and everyone was very excited and very pleased and welcoming for him. And that's not what happened with the religious authorities. So what we're getting from this is again that sense that people's reactions to something good can still be negative and bad if their own pride gets in the way, if their own sense of how things ought to play out is not met. It is simply that contrast between those who come to the God of love with childlike openness and gaze upon the face of Jesus as we do with God, and are wreathed in smiles and are filled with joy as a result, or whether we look upon that and we are disdainful and dismissive because it's not our thing, we don't understand it, or whatever else reason there could be. But it doesn't change the nature of God. And what Mark does beautifully in these passages and throughout his entire gospel, as do the other writers, is tell us what happened when the God of love comes amongst people. Now, for those of us who call ourselves Christian, of course, the demand then is to look at the world through God's eyes and to respond to it, knowing ourselves that we are loved and accepted, pardoned and set free by the death and resurrection of Jesus, and that love is for all people. And if you recognize that, then there is a unity of all humanity. Everybody in this world matters. Everybody in this world deserves respect. Nobody should be shunned because of a perceived difference. Nobody should be ignored because of a perceived lesser importance. All are loved by God, and that makes us all equal. So we too should look at the world and be filled with pity for those who need that love in their hearts and who doesn't. And those of us who call ourselves Christians, who would say that we have God's love in our hearts, then our actions need to show that. The way we spend our lives and the love that we show to others needs to bear witness to the great love we ourselves have received, and bring to the world healing and light and joy and encouragement.